Emily Roberts stood in the lobby of the summit, her fingers lightly grazing the smooth, polished marble countertop that gleamed under the soft mountain sunlight streaming through the glass windows. It was a victory of sorts. The summit was thriving, a far cry from the dilapidated riverside lodge she had found only months earlier. She had poured herself into this transformation. Every detail, every design choice, every strategic move had been meticulously planned. But today, standing in this beautiful lobby, she couldn't help but feel that familiar ache in her chest. It was the same feeling she had gotten every time she walked into Mountain Pine Lodge, the family hotel she had poured her soul into. And yet, today something was different. Her heart felt heavier. "What do you mean Matthew will be CEO?" she had asked that morning, her voice colder than usual, bouncing off the newly renovated walls. She wasn't surprised by the news. She had known this moment was coming. But that didn't stop the sting. She had saved the family hotel, worked day and night, sacrificed everything for it. And now, her younger brother, Matthew, who had shown little interest in the family business over the years, was about to take charge. Her mother's response came swiftly, a wave of her hand as though dismissing the matter entirely. "Emily, darling, Matthew has more natural leadership ability," her mother had said, as if speaking to a child. She hadn't even bothered to look up from the papers she was reading, her face impassive as ever. "You're too focused on the details." Details. That was the word she always heard when they wanted to belittle her accomplishments. Every time she had fixed something, improved something, gone above and beyond, it was always about the details. Never the big picture, never the vision. Matthew strolled into the room then, hands casually shoved into his pockets, that smug little grin plastered across his face like it always was when he knew he had the upper hand. "Hey, sis," he greeted her nonchalantly, as though they were having a casual conversation and not a heated battle over the future of the family business. "Don't take it personally," he added, brushing off her frustration as if it were nothing. "Someone needs to handle the day-to-day stuff while I focus on the bigger picture." Her blood boiled. She had spent the last 8 months turning this place around, from a barely functional mess into the vibrant, successful business it was now. Yet Matthew, who had spent most of his adult life drifting between half-hearted endeavors and never sticking with anything for more than a year, was now being handed the reins like it was his birthright. Like the sweat, blood, and tears Emily had poured into this place meant nothing. Her name was Emily Roberts, and at 52 years old, she never imagined she'd find herself fighting for recognition in her own family's business. For years, she had worked in Chicago, rising from the front desk of a small boutique hotel to regional director for one of the largest hotel chains in the country. Her career had been a series of carefully constructed steps, each one leading her to greater success. But when the call came from her father, tearfully begging her to come home and save the family hotel from the brink of bankruptcy, she didn't hesitate. She knew what had to be done. She had sold her condo in Chicago, cashed in her savings. She had thrown everything she had into saving Mountain Pine Lodge, the family business that had been passed down from her grandparents. A legacy. It was a decision that felt like destiny. But it wasn't the family legacy she was saving. It was the hotel, the one place in the world where she had ever truly felt at home. But here she was, standing in the lobby of the summit, watching her brother be handed everything she had worked for. Felt like a slap in the face. This was supposed to be her moment, her triumph. She had pulled this hotel from the ashes, resurrected it from near bankruptcy, and turned it into a sought-after destination. Yet her family refused to acknowledge the depth of her work. They couldn't see it. Or maybe they just didn't want to. 8 months ago, her father had called her, panicked and desperate. "We're days away from bankruptcy," he had said, his voice trembling. "We need you, Em. We need your help." The sound of his voice had been enough to drive her home. Without a second thought, she had left behind the comfortable life she had built in Chicago, where she was respected and recognized. She had given it all up to come back to Colorado. For the hotel. For the family. But now, standing in the lobby, she realized something. It was all for nothing. The hotel had been in dire straits when she arrived. The decor was outdated, the systems archaic. The online reviews were brutal. "Needs major updates," Not worth the price. Stuck in the past. She had spent hours, days, weeks, clawing her way through the muck, negotiating with suppliers, installing new reservation systems, replacing the threadbare carpets. And that was just the beginning. She had worked tirelessly to restore the Mountain Pine Lodge's reputation. And it worked. Slowly but surely, the bookings started to rise. The reviews turned from scathing to glowing. The lodge went from being a 2-star disaster to a 4-star gem. Emily had even used her industry contacts to get the hotel featured in travel magazines. But none of that seemed to matter now. None of it was enough for her parents. She remembered the late nights, her head bent over spreadsheets, her eyes bloodshot from exhaustion, the constant negotiation with vendors, the meetings with designers, the endless meetings with staff to improve service. But nothing was as draining as the emotional toll it took on her. The cold, dismissive attitude from her family. The constant comparisons to Matthew. God, how many times had she sat at the dinner table, her father casually asking when she was going to settle down, when she was going to stop working so hard. He had never understood her drive. Not in the way Matthew did. Matthew, who had spent most of his life bouncing between different jobs, never sticking with anything long enough to get his hands dirty. But Emily was detail-oriented. Emily was dedicated. Emily had built something out of nothing. And it was that very same dedication that her parents seemed to overlook, because it wasn't glamorous enough for them. But today, it hit a new low. The staff meeting was just a few hours away, the same meeting where Emily was supposed to present the record-breaking quarterly results. She had been counting down the days, eager to show them what she had accomplished. Yet now it felt like a hollow victory, because while she would be presenting her hard work, Matthew would be getting the praise. He would be the one with the title, the one with the spotlight. She could feel the weight of the room, the eyes of the employees on her as she stood there. They all knew the truth. They knew who had really saved the hotel. They knew who had turned things around. And yet, just like Emily, they would have to stand there and pretend that this was normal. Pretend that it was okay. Pretend that Matthew was the one who deserved it. Emily shook her head, feeling a sense of resignation wash over her. She had always known this moment would come. But now that it was here, it hurt more than she had imagined. All the sacrifices, all the work, and yet it was never enough. The irony stung worse than anything. As she looked around the lobby, taking in the modern decor that she had so carefully selected, Emily couldn't help but wonder, what more did they want from her? The days blurred together after that meeting in the lobby. Emily stood at the edge of the summit's grand foyer, taking in the rich, inviting scent of fresh wood and mountain air. It was a different world now, one she had carefully constructed piece by piece. The hotel was thriving, but her heart felt heavy. Every victory was now laced with a sharp, bitter edge. Her family couldn't see it, and that cut deeper than anything. For years, she had given everything to Mountain Pine Lodge, and yet it was never enough. Never enough for them to recognize her sacrifice. But they don't get it. They never have, she thought, the sharp pang of resentment echoing in her chest. She had always been the one who worked tirelessly, the one who made every decision with precision and care. Emily never cared for the spotlight. She just wanted her family to understand that their hotel, their legacy, was her passion. Yet, standing in the lobby of this new place, her place, she realized she was still fighting an old battle. A battle for recognition. A battle she had been fighting her whole life, even as a child, when she helped her parents check in guests at the front desk. It wasn't just about the hotel anymore. It was about everything. The way her parents had always dismissed her achievements. The way they praised Matthew for things he hadn't even done, as if his presence alone was enough to validate him. All the hours, all the work she had poured into Mountain Pine Lodge. It had made a difference. She knew it. But it was too late now. She wasn't the one they turned to anymore. Matthew was. Emily thought back to those early days after she returned to Colorado. She had arrived with a sense of urgency. After all, her father's call had been clear. The hotel was on the brink of bankruptcy. The place was falling apart, and they needed her. But the reality had been even worse than she expected. The hotel had been mired in the past, from its outdated decor to its complete lack of a marketing strategy. The reviews were dismal. Needs major updating, they said. Not worth the price. It made her stomach churn every time she read a new critique. And yet, she never hesitated. She knew what had to be done, and she got to work. From sunrise to late into the night, Emily dove into the details. The carpets were replaced, the furniture updated, and the reservation system, an outdated mess, was completely overhauled. She negotiated tirelessly with suppliers, making sure every dollar spent would yield maximum returns. But beyond the physical work, there was something deeper. Emily wanted to restore the pride her family once had in their legacy. This hotel was more than just a building to her. It was a part of who she was. It was her heart, her soul, and she couldn't let it slip away. But with every little victory, the recognition she hoped for felt farther and farther away. Matthew, on the other hand, seemed to have everything handed to him. He was rarely around, off in Denver pursuing whatever new hobby caught his eye. But every time he returned, it was as if his words were gospel. "Hey sis," he'd say, all too casual, like he owned the place. "What about this idea? We should try this. Maybe we should do this differently." And every time, her parents would nod approvingly. Every suggestion from him, no matter how vague or underdeveloped, was taken as gospel. Meanwhile, Emily was the one putting in the hours, making the tough decisions, and ensuring the hotel ran smoothly. But it was never enough. Her work seemed invisible to them, while Matthew's passing interest was deemed valuable. Even when she presented detailed reports, spreadsheets, financial projections, guest reviews that praised her efforts, it never seemed to make an impact. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You're too detail-oriented, Emily. You focus too much on the little things." It made her blood boil, but she would never let it show. She was the one who saved the hotel. She was the one who had made the difference. And yet, no one seemed to notice. "I'm not going to do this anymore," she thought one morning as she sat in the summit's quiet, polished office. Emily had been staring at the spreadsheet before her, tracking her bookings, revenue, and profits. It was a dream come true, the kind of success she had always hoped for, but it felt hollow now. Because while her own business flourished, Mountain Pine Lodge floundered under Matthew's careless direction. It wasn't that Emily wanted to see her family fail. It was that her family had refused to see her succeed, and that was worse. One day, Emily overheard a conversation between her parents in the living room. Her father was on the phone with Matthew, trying to get him to listen to the staff's concerns, the complaints about inconsistent service, the poor guest reviews. And yet, Matthew remained unbothered, almost dismissive. "It's just numbers, Dad," he had said casually. "Numbers aren't everything. We'll get it back on track. Trust me." Emily gripped the edge of the desk, her nails digging into the wood, as she thought about how hard she had fought for the success she was enjoying now. The number of hours spent researching new trends, improving systems, training staff, and ensuring every guest had an exceptional experience. It was more than numbers. It was the heart of the hotel. Matthew's approach was different. He cut corners, slashed budgets without understanding the consequences, and made decisions without fully grasping the impact they would have on the hotel. She could already see the cracks forming. Complaints about the continental breakfast service being cut, the staff being pushed beyond their limits, and guests noticing the lack of attention to detail. It all started to unravel. And yet, they would still defend him, she thought bitterly. It's always been this way. Emily had put up with it for months, quietly seething under the surface. But something inside her snapped when Matthew decided to fire Maria, their head housekeeper. Maria had been with the family for 15 years. She had worked through every ups and downs of the hotel, and she was beloved by the staff. But Matthew didn't care. He had made up some excuse about her inflexibility with a new scheduling system he had implemented without consulting anyone. The look on Maria's face when she was told to leave the hotel after all those years, all the dedication she had given, was more than Emily could bear. That morning, as Matthew stood there with his arms crossed, explaining his decision to fire Maria, Emily felt something deep within her, an all-consuming need to intervene. She couldn't let him do this. Not when it was her hard work, her vision, that had kept the hotel running. "You can't do this," she had said, her voice shaking with anger but also firm, decisive. "Maria is a key part of this team. You can't just throw her out." In that moment, she knew something had to change. She could no longer watch as Matthew destroyed everything she had built. She wasn't going to let him take what she had worked for. She had given too much of herself to this family, to this business, and it was time to put herself first. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. But let me take you back a bit further. It wasn't just about the hotel anymore. It was about everything. The years of overlooked achievements, the constant dismissals. The battle for recognition had been going on for much longer than she had realized. Every small victory, every completed project, every successful deal had been met with half-hearted congratulations. It was as though nothing she did could ever be enough. But Emily wasn't giving up. Not this time. Emily spent the next few weeks planning, researching, and weighing her options. She knew she had to act fast. But the truth was, she didn't need her family's approval anymore. She was done fighting for a place in their world. She was going to create her own. Emily's thoughts raced as she stared out the office window of the summit, watching the sun dip below the mountain range, casting an amber glow across the snowy peaks. The view was breathtaking, yet all she could focus on was the sharp, gnawing ache in her chest. The summit was thriving. Bookings were through the roof, staff morale was high, and the hotel was becoming a local sensation. But it didn't feel like enough. Not with the constant weight of Mountain Pine Lodge hanging over her shoulders, like an anchor she couldn't shake off. For the first time since she'd made the decision to leave her family's hotel behind, Emily felt an undeniable surge of anger rise within her. She had spent years trying to prove herself, working tirelessly, sacrificing everything to save Mountain Pine Lodge. And yet, despite everything she had done, it still wasn't enough. It was never enough for them. Her parents, who had always dismissed her contributions, now treated her like a stranger, as if she had no place in their world anymore. It was no longer about proving her worth. It was about taking control of her own future. And that's when it hit her. The thought that had been lingering in the back of her mind for weeks. The Riverside Lodge. The old, rundown hotel had been sitting on the market for months, barely a blip on anyone's radar. It had been one of Mountain Pine Lodge's main competitors before it fell into disrepair. Emily had always known the place had potential, but at the time, there had been no room for it in her plans. Now, however, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally build something truly her own. Something free from the chains of her family's expectations. She had watched the for sale sign outside the Riverside Lodge for weeks, almost hypnotized by it. Every time she passed it on her way into town, the urge to stop, to make an offer, grew stronger. But it was more than just the physical property that called to her. It was the chance to prove that she could do it. Without them, without anyone else's approval, she could turn it around. She could build something that would stand on its own. Without a second thought, Emily reached for her phone and called her realtor. The conversation was quick. The owners were eager to sell, and with her savings and excellent credit, she knew she could make it happen. By the time she hung up, she was already making plans. Tomorrow, she'd visit the property. Tomorrow, she'd take the first step toward building her own future. As she sat back in her chair, Emily felt a wave of calm wash over her. For the first time in months, she felt in control. She wasn't bound by her family's legacy anymore. She wasn't fighting for recognition. She was fighting for something better, something hers. The next morning, Emily drove out to the Riverside Lodge. The snow was thick on the ground, but the view was magnificent, stretching out over the valley with sweeping, untouched landscapes. The hotel itself was much as she remembered, old and weathered, but it had the bones of something incredible. The potential was there, waiting for someone with vision to breathe new life into it. Walking through the empty halls of the Riverside Lodge, Emily saw beyond the peeling wallpaper and cracked tiles. She saw what it could become. A luxury, eco-friendly boutique hotel with a focus on local culture, sustainability, and top-tier hospitality. It was everything Mountain Pine Lodge could have been, if they had only listened to her. The plan came together quickly in her mind. She would bring in the best design team, modernize the outdated systems, and transform the guest experience. She would make the Riverside Lodge a place where people would come not just for a bed, but for an experience. An unforgettable one. Every detail would matter. The art on the walls would come from local artists. The food would be sourced from sustainable farms. The staff would be trained to provide exceptional service, just as Emily had done at Mountain Pine Lodge. She could already see it, the transformation that would take place in the coming months. The Riverside Lodge would be reborn as the Summit. Emily smiled to herself. The name was perfect. It wasn't just a hotel. It was the pinnacle of everything she had always wanted to create in the hospitality industry. It would stand as a testament to her ability to succeed on her own terms, without anyone's help. As the weeks passed, Emily dove headfirst into the project. She wasn't just overseeing the renovation. She was in the trenches. She worked closely with contractors, designers, and staff, making sure every detail was executed to perfection. She sourced the highest quality materials, from sustainable wood to locally made furnishings, and personally selected every piece of art and decor. The restaurant menu would feature organic, locally grown ingredients, and she insisted on providing guests with an unparalleled spa experience, complete with natural therapies that drew from the local environment. Every day brought a new challenge. There were setbacks, of course, delays with suppliers, unexpected costs, and moments when Emily wasn't sure if everything would come together in time. But through it all, she remained focused. This was her chance. She wasn't going to let anything stop her. As the transformation of the Summit took shape, Emily's excitement grew. She poured every ounce of energy into making it a success. But it wasn't just the physical space she was building. It was her new future. She wasn't just putting up walls and installing furniture. She was creating a legacy. Her legacy. The media took notice almost immediately. Local publications picked up on the changes, praising the eco-friendly design, the luxurious amenities, and the high level of service. The first batch of guests raved about their experiences, leaving glowing reviews online and helping to build momentum. The buzz around town grew, and before long, word of mouth spread like wildfire. Yet, even as the Summit flourished, Emily couldn't escape the constant pull of her family's hotel. It was hard to ignore the steady stream of complaints she heard about Matthew's mismanagement of Mountain Pine Lodge. The reviews continued to slip. Guests complained about poor service, outdated rooms, and a lack of attention to detail. It was only a matter of time before the truth was undeniable. Emily's decision to leave had been the right one. Her parents, however, refused to see it. They continued to defend Matthew's decisions, as if his occasional presence at family dinners could somehow make up for the chaos he had caused. They couldn't see that Emily's success wasn't just about money or accolades. It was about doing things right. It was about making an impact, creating something meaningful. Still, Emily felt a bittersweet sense of satisfaction. She had built something incredible. Her success was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could do it. On her own, the Summit was thriving, and it was a reflection of everything she had always believed in: hard work, integrity, and dedication to excellence. As she sat in her office at the Summit, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had taken a risk, walked away from everything she knew, and built something from the ground up. And now she was seeing the rewards. The Summit wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of her resilience and determination. But there was still one thing left to do. One final piece of the puzzle. Emily had promised herself that she would never go back to Mountain Pine Lodge, never return to the place that had pushed her aside for so long. But when she received the call from her parents, asking her to come back and help fix things, she knew it was time to make a decision. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you, have you ever had to make a difficult decision like Emily's? A choice that changed everything? Drop a comment below, sharing your own story, and let's connect. And if you believe in following your dreams, no matter the obstacles, hit that like button. This story is far from over. But Emily had made her decision. Mountain Pine Lodge was no longer her responsibility. It wasn't her fight anymore, and she wasn't about to let anyone convince her otherwise. This was her future. The summit was her future, and no one could take that away from her. The months that followed the grand opening of the summit felt like a whirlwind to Emily. There was a quiet confidence that settled in her chest every time she walked through the front doors, past the smiling staff, and into the lobby. The hotel was buzzing with energy, guests coming and going, all of them happy with the experience Emily had meticulously crafted. Every corner of the property was exactly as she had envisioned it. Warm, inviting, and bursting with character. It wasn't just a hotel. It was a reflection of her values, her dedication, and her vision for the future. Yet despite all the success, Emily couldn't shake the growing tension with her family. The summit's success seemed to only shine a harsher light on the decline of Mountain Pine Lodge. Every time she heard the latest gossip, the complaints about Matthew's management, she felt a pang of regret. She had tried so hard to make her parents see her worth, and yet, despite everything, they had turned their backs on her. Their blind loyalty to Matthew stung, but Emily refused to let it deter her. She had made her choice, and now the summit was her responsibility, her legacy, her triumph. The truth was, the more successful the summit became, the more distant Emily felt from her family. They hadn't even congratulated her on the success of her new venture. She had heard through the grapevine that Mountain Pine Lodge had continued to struggle under Matthew's leadership, but instead of reaching out to her for help, they stubbornly clung to their belief that Matthew would figure it out. Emily had done everything she could to help them, to save the family business. But in their eyes, her efforts had never been enough. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her mother. "Emily, we need to talk. Can you come by the lodge later today? It's urgent." Her stomach twisted. She hadn't heard from them in weeks. Every time she tried to reach out, they avoided her. Now, out of the blue, they were asking her to come by. Part of her wanted to ignore the message, to focus on her success and the future she was building at the summit. But another part of her, some small, lingering hope, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had realized they were wrong. That they had seen her for what she was capable of. With a heavy heart, Emily set the phone down. There was no avoiding this. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. She had to face the truth. Her family was never going to change. But she couldn't help the flicker of hope that still lingered deep inside. Later that afternoon, Emily drove to Mountain Pine Lodge. The place looked the same as it always had, quiet, almost forgotten. The once bustling lobby was now eerily empty. She parked her car and made her way to the front entrance. Her mother greeted her with a tight smile, but there was something off about it. Something that told Emily this conversation was going to be far from what she had imagined. "Emily, it's good to see you," her mother said, her voice soft but strained. "We've been thinking about everything, and we wanted to talk to you." Emily felt her pulse quicken. She had braced herself for this moment for months, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she was ready. She followed her mother into the quiet sitting room, where her father sat, looking older than she remembered. There was a weight in the room, a tension that seemed to settle over them all like a cloud. "We've been trying to fix things with the lodge," her father began, his voice low, "but we just can't seem to get it right. We've tried everything, Emily, but Matthew's just struggling." Emily's heart sank. She had known this was coming. She had known the day would come when they would finally admit that Matthew wasn't cut out for the job. But hearing it from them, seeing the disappointment on their faces, was still harder than she had imagined. "We're asking for your help, her father continued. "We need someone with experience, someone who knows how to run a business. We thought maybe you could come back, help Matthew. We don't want to lose everything." Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. They wanted her to come back, but the price would be too high. She couldn't go back to Mountain Pine Lodge, Not after everything that had happened. Not after the years of feeling invisible, of pouring her heart and soul into something that they had never truly appreciated. "I can't do that," Emily said quietly, her voice steady but firm. "I offered to help when you needed it. I gave up everything to come back, and you chose Matthew. You chose him over me." Her mother's face fell. "Emily, please." "No," Emily interrupted, shaking her head. "You didn't want my help then, and now that things are falling apart, you want me to fix it? It's too late. I can't keep sacrificing everything for you. For this place." She glanced around the familiar, worn walls of Mountain Pine Lodge. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had lived here, a lifetime ago that she had believed in the dream of saving this hotel for her family. But now that dream was gone. "You don't understand, do you?" Emily's voice cracked. "I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because I was tired of fighting for something that was never mine. I gave you everything I had, and you ignored me. You chose Matthew. Now you need to live with that choice." Her father looked away, his hands trembling slightly. Her mother looked up at her, eyes filled with something. Regret? Guilt? But it didn't matter anymore. Emily had made her decision. She had fought for her family's business, and now it was time to fight for herself. The rest of the conversation was a blur. Her parents pleaded with her, trying to guilt-trip her into returning, promising they would be different. But Emily knew better. She wasn't going back to a place where she would never be seen. She wasn't going back to fight for their approval anymore. As she left Mountain Pine Lodge for the last time, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. She had made her choice. The summit was her future. And as she drove back to her hotel, a sense of peace settled over her. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone anymore. She didn't need to fight for a place in her family's world. She had built something on her own, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the summit continued to soar. Bookings kept coming in, and Emily's reputation in the industry grew. She had built a team of passionate, dedicated individuals who shared her vision. Together, they created a space that wasn't just about luxury. It was about creating experiences that left people changed. The summit wasn't just a hotel. It was a testament to Emily's resilience, her dedication, and her refusal to settle for anything less than what she deserved. And as the awards and accolades piled up, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The summit was just the start of her new chapter, and no one, least of all her family, could take that away from her. But still, there were moments when she thought about them, her parents, Matthew, and she wondered if they would ever understand what she had done, what she had sacrificed, and what she had built. But then, she would look around at the vibrant, bustling lobby of the summit, filled with guests who appreciated everything she had worked so hard to create, and she would remember that this was her legacy. The summit was her legacy, and that was enough. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Emily's life had become a rhythm, steady, fulfilling, and wholly her own. The summit had become more than just a hotel. It was a place of pride, a sanctuary for those who craved something different. As she walked through the corridors, past the beautiful art installations she had personally curated, she felt a sense of peace. There was no pressure to conform to someone else's expectations. No more proving herself. No more hoping for acknowledgement. The summit was a reflection of her vision, her values, her commitment to excellence. It was all there in every corner of the hotel. But even in the midst of her success, the echoes of her family's rejection still lingered in the back of her mind. It wasn't that Emily regretted her decision to leave Mountain Pine Lodge. It was the emotional weight of the years she had spent trying to be seen, trying to be enough. It had worn her down, stripped away pieces of herself she wasn't sure she could ever get back. Now, standing at the helm of something entirely her own, Emily understood one crucial thing. Her self-worth had never depended on anyone else's approval. Not her parents, not Matthew's. It had always been within her. She just needed to learn to recognize it. In the quiet moments, when she sat in her office overlooking the mountain vista, Emily reflected on everything she had endured. She had fought for recognition, but the truth was, she had never needed to. It wasn't the validation from her family or the accolades from the industry that defined her success. It was the unwavering belief in her own abilities. The summit had proven that. She had built it from the ground up, and it had flourished because she had never once wavered in her determination. One afternoon, as Emily was walking through the hotel, she passed the front desk where one of the staff, Sarah, was speaking with a guest. Sarah had been with her from the very beginning, part of the team she had handpicked because of their shared vision. They had been through it all together. Long nights of planning, hard decisions, and moments when Emily wasn't sure if it would all come together. Now, Sarah was smiling, chatting with the guest about their stay, making them feel like part of something special. Emily watched for a moment, and for the first time, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about business. This was about building a family, a team, community. Emily's success at the summit wasn't just about creating a profitable hotel. It was about creating a space where people could grow, where they could find their own sense of purpose, just as she had. She had spent so long fighting for her place, for recognition, but now she saw that what truly mattered was the impact she could have on the people around her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. The summit had become a place where she could lift others up, just as she had once dreamed for herself. The phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her mother. Emily hesitated for a moment before picking up. The last time they had spoken, it had been awkward, strained. Her mother's words laden with guilt, her father's quiet disappointment hanging in the air. But this time felt different. There was a shift. Emily could feel it before her mother even spoke. Emily. Her mother's voice was soft, almost tentative. We've been talking. Your father and I. We've been thinking a lot about everything. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had heard this before, the familiar words that always led to some kind of emotional manipulation, some attempt to pull her back into their world. But this time, her mother's tone was different. There was an openness there, a sense of vulnerability that Emily had never heard before. We've been wrong, her mother continued, the words slow and deliberate. We should have seen it sooner. All you've done for the hotel. All you've done for the family. We were blind, Em. I'm sorry. The apology landed in Emily's chest like a stone. But it wasn't the sharp, stinging wound she had expected. This time it was something else. Something softer, more healing. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition. Emily had wanted this for so long. But now, standing at the summit of her own success, she realized it didn't mean as much as it once had. Her journey was hers alone. It's not about the apology, Mom, Emily said, her voice steady. It's about what I've learned, and what you've taught me without even knowing it. I had to do this for me. I had to stop waiting for approval from anyone. Not from you. Not from Matthew. I had to see my own worth. Her mother was quiet on the other end of the line. Emily could hear the sound of her breathing, steady and calm. It felt like a bridge was being built between them, one she had never thought possible. I don't need you to come back, Mom, Emily continued, a smile tugging at her lips. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it was true. Emily wasn't looking for validation anymore. She didn't need to prove herself. The summit was her legacy, and that was enough. She had built something beautiful, something lasting. She had found peace in the life she had created, and that peace was all she needed. As the conversation wound down, Emily hung up the phone, her mind still processing everything that had just been said. She didn't need her family's approval to be successful. She didn't need anyone's validation. Her strength, her resilience, had always been within her. She just needed to believe it, and now she did. The following weeks were a blur of continued success and growth. The summit had become a destination for travelers, a place where people came not just for the luxury, but for the experience, the warmth, and the personal touch that Emily had always envisioned. The hotel's reputation continued to soar, with awards and accolades pouring in from all corners of the industry. But it wasn't the recognition that kept her going. It was the knowledge that she had built something real, something lasting. She had done it on her own terms, and that was worth more than any trophy or certificate ever could be. And as the summit continued to thrive, Emily found herself more focused on the people around her. Her team, her guests, and the relationships she had forged along the way. She had learned that success wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating connections, lifting others up, and being the kind of leader who inspired those around her to be their best. One night, as she sat on the balcony of the summit, watching the stars twinkle in the clear mountain sky, Emily couldn't help but smile. She had come so far, from the struggles of trying to prove herself in her family's world, to the pain of walking away, to this moment of peace. Emily had learned that success wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey, and she had finally found her way. The summit was her creation, her triumph, and it was just the beginning. As the night stretched on, Emily felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for the lessons learned, the strength she had discovered within herself, and the life she had built. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And in that moment, she realized that she had everything she needed, right here, in her own hands. She had finally found the peace she had been searching for. And it was more than enough. Emily's life had always been defined by the pursuit of excellence. She had spent years climbing, struggling, and fighting for recognition in a world that constantly seemed to push her aside. But the moment she stopped chasing the approval of others, the moment she truly started believing in herself, everything changed. The summit had become a testament to her determination, her vision, and her resilience. It wasn't just a hotel, it was her legacy. But as successful as the summit had become, Emily knew in her heart that she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The summit had given her everything she needed. Success, recognition, peace. But it had also opened her eyes to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The hotel industry was vast, and Emily had learned from her experiences that there were so many ways to create something meaningful. She had always dreamed of expanding beyond the walls of the summit, of creating a brand, a company that would redefine the hospitality industry, one built on the values she had fought so hard for. And so, after months of careful planning, she took the leap and founded her own company, Ember Group. At its core, Ember Group was designed to challenge the traditional norms of the hospitality world. Emily envisioned a company that focused not only on providing exceptional guest experiences, but also on creating sustainable, eco-friendly solutions for the industry. The company would specialize in designing and managing luxury, boutique hotels that emphasized local culture, sustainability, and community. It would be a platform for innovation, for pushing boundaries, for creating something that stood apart from the cookie-cutter hotels that dominated the market. It was everything she had always dreamed of, and she was determined to make it a success. But even with all her success, Emily had yet to find someone to share her journey with. Someone who truly understood her passion, her vision, and the work that went into creating something so special. She had poured everything into her work, and in the process had lost touch with many of the relationships that once meant the world to her. She had never allowed herself to truly open up to someone. But all of that changed one evening at an industry conference. It was one of those nights where everything seemed to fall into place. Emily had been invited to speak on a panel about the future of the hospitality industry, and the event was filled with industry leaders, designers, and hotel owners. It was there, in the crowd, that she first saw him, Liam, a man who seemed completely out of place, yet utterly captivating. He wasn't like the others, dressed in expensive suits or trying to impress with their connections. Instead, Liam had a quiet confidence about him, an authenticity that drew her in immediately. Their eyes met across the room, and for a brief moment, Emily felt her heart skip a beat. There was something about him, something that felt right. He wasn't just another businessman trying to make a name for himself. He was different, and when their paths crossed later that evening, and they started talking, Emily felt an instant connection. Liam was an architect, an expert in sustainable design and eco-friendly building practices. He had worked on projects all over the world, and his passion for creating beautiful, sustainable spaces was evident in every word he spoke. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their careers, their dreams, and their shared vision for the future. For the first time in years, Emily felt understood. Liam didn't see her as just a successful hotelier or a businesswoman. He saw her as a person, someone who was passionate, driven, and unafraid to take risks. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and by the end of the evening, Emily found herself thinking about him in a way she hadn't thought about anyone in a long time. The following months were a whirlwind. Emily and Liam began to collaborate on a number of projects, their professional relationship quickly evolving into something more. They complemented each other perfectly, her expertise in the hospitality industry and his knowledge of sustainable design created the perfect synergy. Together, they began to build a new vision for Ember Group, one that went beyond hotels and into the realm of real estate development. They wanted to build entire communities, spaces where people could live, work, and thrive in harmony with the environment. It was bold, ambitious, and exactly what Emily had always wanted to do. Their bond deepened as they spent more time together, working long hours, brainstorming new ideas, and facing challenges head-on. They became a team not just in business but in life. There was a quiet comfort in knowing that they had each other, that they were building something meaningful together. Emily had never imagined that her future would look like this, shared with someone who understood her so completely, who challenged her, supported her, and believed in her just as much as she believed in herself. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing curveballs. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging meeting with an investor, Emily received a message from her parents. She had avoided them for months, focusing entirely on her work and her relationship with Liam. But the message was clear. They wanted to meet. Her stomach turned as she read the words, "We need to talk about the future of the family business." It had been a long time since Emily had spoken to her parents about Mountain Pine Lodge. She had moved on, built something new, something better. But as much as she had distanced herself from them, a small part of her still held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they had come to understand the choices she had made. With a heavy heart, she agreed to meet them. When she arrived at the meeting, she found her parents sitting across from her at a table, the same familiar tension hanging in the air. But this time something was different. Her father looked tired, older. Her mother, once so poised and confident, seemed a little smaller. The weight of their words, the gravity of their apology, was impossible to ignore. "We've been thinking about everything, Emily," her father began. "About Mountain Pine Lodge, about you, and about your success with the summit. We know we made mistakes. We've seen how you've turned things around, and we've realized that maybe we missed something all those years. You have vision. You have what it takes. And it's time we acknowledged that." It was the apology Emily had been waiting for, but it felt different now. It wasn't the apology she had longed for when she was younger, desperate for their approval. It wasn't about them seeing her worth anymore. It was about them finally understanding that she had built something incredible on her own. And that was enough. "We were wrong," her mother said softly, "and we want to make it right." Her father continued, his voice quieter now. "We've been thinking about the future. We've realized that Mountain Pine Lodge is struggling, and we need help. And we know that you've built something that could make a real difference. We'd like to talk about merging our two companies. We want to work with you." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. A part of Emily wanted to scream, to tell them that it was too late, that she didn't need them anymore. But another part of her, an older, wiser part, realized that this wasn't about her ego. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about moving forward, creating something new, and building a future that was bigger than the past. She looked at Liam, who was sitting beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. He gave her a reassuring smile, and in that moment, she knew that whatever decision she made, they would face it together. "We've built something new," Emily said, her voice steady but calm. "And it's not about merging our companies or taking over Mountain Pine Lodge. It's about creating something better for the future. Together." Her parents looked at each other, then back at Emily. There was a flicker of understanding in their eyes. They had been wrong, but they were finally ready to make things right. And for the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of closure. In the weeks that followed, Emily, Liam, and her parents began to work together. They didn't merge their companies in the traditional sense. Instead, they created a new vision, one that blended the strengths of both businesses. Mountain Pine Lodge would be transformed, its legacy preserved but revitalized under Emily's leadership, while Ember Group would continue to expand into new ventures. The family dynamic had shifted. Emily had learned to let go of the past and embrace the future. She had built her own success, her own family, and her own legacy. And in the end, she had come to realize that true success wasn't about who you worked with or how you got there. It was about how you lived the journey and who you became along the way. With Liam by her side, Emily had built a future that was hers, and no one could take that away. Emily sat in her office late that evening, the soft glow from the desk lamp casting shadows on the walls of her new home, the headquarters of Ember Group. The space was a reflection of everything she had worked for. Sleek, modern, filled with light, and above all, a place of growth. The success of the summit had been nothing short of incredible, but the partnership she had agreed to with her family and Mountain Pine Lodge had opened up an entirely new chapter. Emily had always known that her journey wasn't just about building something on her own, but creating something lasting, something that would live beyond her own efforts. When her parents had suggested merging their business with hers, Emily had been hesitant at first. For years, she had built a reputation, not just in the hospitality industry but in her family's eyes, for doing it her way. The summit was proof that her path had been right. But the discussion had sparked something in her, something more profound than just business. It was about healing. It was about rebuilding trust. She realized that sometimes the most powerful decisions were not just about individual success, but the strength of uniting people, even when it seemed impossible. In the weeks that followed, she and Liam worked tirelessly to reshape Mountain Pine Lodge's future. They weren't just renovating the building, restoring the furniture, or tweaking the branding. This was about something bigger. They reimagined the very essence of the hotel, making it a reflection of the core values that Emily had fought for all these years: sustainability, warmth, and innovation. The name would stay the same, but the spirit would change, infused with the vision of Ember Group. Emily found herself more deeply involved in the process than she had anticipated. There were moments of doubt, when old wounds resurfaced or when the familiar tension between her and her parents lingered. But Liam was always by her side, offering a steady hand and words of encouragement. He had his own role in the transformation of Mountain Pine Lodge, working closely with architects and designers to integrate the sustainable concepts they had cultivated at Ember Group into the hotel's renovation. But the journey wasn't all smooth. There were long meetings with contractors, endless discussions with her parents about vision and direction, and even moments when Emily wondered if the bridge between the past and the future could ever truly be built. The weight of the legacy was always there, a constant reminder of the family she had tried to break free from. But every day, as the new Mountain Pine Lodge began to take shape, she also realized that this wasn't about reclaiming what was lost. It was about building something new on top of the foundation they had once laid together. Her parents, too, seemed to be changing. The careful distance they had kept for so long was beginning to fade. They were no longer the distant figures of authority they had once been in her life. Instead, they were collaborators, learning to trust Emily's judgment and vision, and letting go of their own preconceived ideas. Emily knew, though, that they still had their reservations. There were moments when her father would hesitate, or her mother would voice doubts about the risks involved, but Emily would remind them, gently but firmly, that this was a new era. It wasn't about clinging to the past. It was about pushing forward. A few months into the collaboration, as Mountain Pine Lodge started to show signs of its revitalization, Emily stood outside the hotel one evening, watching the sunset over the mountains. The reflection of the golden light shimmered on the hotel's freshly painted facade, and for the first time, she felt at peace. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer defined her. What mattered now was the future they were creating. The future of a family who had learned, at last, to see her for who she really was, not just a daughter or a sister, but a leader in her own right. Liam stepped up beside her, his arm brushing against hers. "It looks beautiful," he said quietly, his voice full of pride. "What you've done here, it's incredible." Emily smiled, her heart full. "It's not just me. It's all of us. It's about what we've created together." "Together?" Liam echoed, looking at her with a look of admiration that made her heart swell. Their partnership was more than just professional. It was the kind of connection she had always dreamed of, a partnership in life, not just business. They had been through so much together. They had seen each other at their best and their worst, and yet they had always supported one another. As the months passed, Emily found herself growing more and more comfortable with the changes. The company was flourishing, and Mountain Pine Lodge was turning heads in the industry once again. The merger wasn't a traditional one. It was a blending of visions, a new family dynamic. The lodge's legacy was being honored, but it was being shaped into something Emily had always envisioned. And as her relationship with her parents continued to evolve, something beautiful happened. They began to treat her not just as their daughter, but as a peer, a business partner. There were still moments when old habits crept in, when her mother would ask if she was sure about a decision, or when her father's quiet skepticism would surface. But Emily had grown stronger, more confident in her choices. She no longer needed their approval to feel validated. One evening, as they sat around a dinner table at Mountain Pine Lodge, her parents shared news that would change everything once again. They had been in talks with several other investors and hotel chains, trying to secure a future for the lodge beyond its legacy. But after all the hard work Emily had put into rebuilding it, they had come to a decision. "We've been thinking," her father said, his voice steady but soft, "and we want to propose something. We think the next step for both our businesses, the Lodge and Ember Group, should be to merge more formally. Not just a partnership, but a full integration of both companies. Your vision is clear and we want to support it. We think combining our strengths will make us stronger." Emily felt the weight of their words, but this time, she wasn't hesitant. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. This was about making a difference together. Her parents had finally come to see that. They recognized the value of what she had built, and they wanted to be part of it. Not as the decision-makers, but as partners who respected her leadership. "I think it's time," Emily said, her voice steady. "But it won't be just about combining our businesses. It's about creating something new, something that will honor what we've all worked for. It's about the future." Her parents nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. It wasn't just a business deal. It was a new chapter in their family's history, one where they had learned to work together, trust each other, and embrace the future without holding on to the past. As Emily looked around the table at her parents, at Liam, and at the team that had been with her through it all, she realized that this was what true success looked like. Not the accolades or the recognition, but the ability to create something lasting with the people who mattered most. She wasn't just rebuilding a hotel. She was rebuilding her family, her life, and her future. And no matter what came next, she knew that the journey had been worth every moment. The days following the proposal to merge the businesses were filled with intense meetings and long discussions. But Emily felt a sense of peace that she hadn't experienced before. She had always been a woman of action, determined to carve her own path. But now, with the partnership of her family, she realized that she wasn't alone in her journey anymore. Her parents, once distant and indifferent, were now actively engaged in shaping the future of Mountain Pine Lodge. They weren't just handing her control, they were trusting her to lead them into a new era. It wasn't an easy process. There were compromises to be made, delicate balances to be struck. Emily had built Ember Group from the ground up, and she wasn't about to relinquish the core values that had made the company a success. She wanted to ensure that any integration of their businesses wasn't just a financial decision. It had to align with the vision of sustainable growth, innovation, and community that had always driven her. The family agreed, albeit reluctantly at times, but over time, they saw the wisdom in her approach. Liam was by her side through it all, not just as a partner in business but as her partner in life. Together, they crafted a new business model, one that combined the luxury and legacy of Mountain Pine Lodge with the eco-conscious, innovative spirit of Ember Group. The new company would focus on revitalizing the hospitality industry through sustainable tourism, integrating the best of both worlds. They even brainstormed new projects, from eco-friendly resorts in the mountains to urban retreats that emphasize green living. It wasn't just about growing the business. It was about making a tangible difference in the world, creating spaces where people could reconnect with nature while still enjoying the luxuries of modern life. They worked late into the night, designing new branding, creating marketing strategies, and refining their approach. The excitement of building something new was infectious, and Emily felt her passion reignite in a way she hadn't felt in years. But even as they built this new vision, Emily knew that the path wasn't without its challenges. The dynamics within her family were still evolving. Though the business was moving forward, Emily could sense the underlying tension between her and Matthew. His role in the merger was still unclear. He had always been more of a figurehead than a hands-on leader. Emily had no interest in dragging him along or caving to his whims, but at the same time, she didn't want to shut him out entirely. The years of frustration, of being overlooked, had left their mark on her, and Matthew's seeming lack of accountability weighed heavily on her. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of negotiations, Emily sat down with Liam, their favorite way of unwinding being quiet conversation over a glass of wine. She found comfort in his presence, in the way he listened without judgment, always offering insight that seemed to cut straight to the heart of things. "What's bothering you?" Liam asked, sensing her unease. Emily took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "It's Matthew. I'm trying to move past the bitterness, but sometimes I just feel like he hasn't really learned anything. It's hard to be in this position with him, to work with him, knowing how much he's cost the family." Liam nodded thoughtfully, his eyes warm but understanding. "You've made great strides, Emily. You've built something that's yours. This new chapter with the company, it's your vision. But family dynamics, they're complicated. Sometimes the hardest part of leadership is letting go of past resentment and learning how to work together. You're doing that, and I think deep down so is Matthew. He might not show it the way you do, but he's still trying to find his place in all of this." Emily smiled faintly, feeling the weight of his words. Liam always knew how to ground her. She had spent so much of her life fighting against the expectations of her family, of Mountain Pine Lodge, that she had almost forgotten how to truly let go of the past. "I know. I've been so focused on proving myself that I haven't really allowed myself to heal," Emily admitted. "But I think I'm ready to try, ready to make things right with him, and with everyone." The decision to try and reconcile with Matthew was not one Emily made lightly. It was the kind of thing that required vulnerability, something Emily had always kept at arm's length. She had spent too many years feeling rejected, too many years working to prove herself, but she realized that in order to move forward, she needed to let go of the weight that had been holding her back. A few weeks later, after several tense but necessary conversations with her parents and Liam, Emily arranged a meeting with Matthew. It wasn't a grand gesture. They met in the quiet of the Summit's lounge, a place that had seen both triumph and turmoil. Emily sat across from her brother, her hands folded in front of her, her posture steady but her heart racing. "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice calm but firm, "about how things have gone between us. And I want to be honest with you. I've held on to a lot of anger for a long time, but I don't want that to define our future. I want us to work together, really work together, and build something better for the company. For all of us." Matthew looked at her, his face unreadable. "You've done an incredible job, Em. I can't deny that. I wasn't ready to take on what you did. I know I've let you down, but I'm willing to try. I think we can build something great together. If you'll let me." For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Matthew she had known all these years. This was someone who had grown, someone who was willing to take responsibility for the past. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt the weight of their shared history begin to lift. "I'm willing to give you a chance," Emily said, her voice softening. "But it's going to take time and it's going to take trust. We have to be on the same page, Matthew. And we have to be ready to let go of the old patterns that have held us back." Matthew nodded, his expression softening. "I know. I'm ready." And just like that, something shifted between them. It wasn't an instant fix, it wasn't magic. But it was a start. Emily had made peace with the past, and in doing so, she had opened the door to a new chapter. A chapter where she and Matthew could, for the first time, truly work together. As the months went by, the business continued to thrive. The merger wasn't just about the companies, it was about the family, about healing old wounds and rebuilding what had been broken. And Emily, with Liam by her side, knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to push forward, not just for success, but for the future they had always dreamed of. In the end, Emily had found the balance she had been searching for her entire life. Success wasn't about doing it alone. It was about building a future with those who truly mattered. It was about the connections they made, the trust they built, and the legacy they would leave behind together. As Emily stood in the bustling lobby of the summit, now a symbol of everything she had fought for, she realized that success was never just about the destination. It was about the journey, the growth, the setbacks, and the relationships she had built along the way. She had spent years proving her worth, not just to her family, but to herself. And in the process, she had discovered something more profound than professional achievements: the strength to forgive, to evolve, and to create something lasting. Her partnership with Liam, her reconciliation with her family, and the transformation of Mountain Pine Lodge were not just milestones in her career. They were reflections of the person she had become. Emily had learned that true success wasn't about validation or accolades. It was about the ability to build a future on your own terms, to lift others up, and to create something meaningful that could stand the test of time. As Ember Group and Mountain Pine Lodge continued to grow and thrive together, Emily understood that her journey wasn't defined by the past, but by the choices she made every day moving forward. She had built a legacy that was hers, one that wasn't just about business, but about family, love, and the impact they could make on the world. And as she looked toward the future, standing beside Liam and the team they had built, she knew that no challenge was too great. Together, they had created something extraordinary, something that would endure for generations to come. Emily had finally found peace, not because everything had gone perfectly, but because she had learned to trust herself, to let go of old hurts, and to embrace the endless possibilities ahead. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that the future was hers to shape, and that with the right people by her side, anything was possible. It wasn't just about growing the business. It was about making a tangible difference in the world, creating spaces where people could reconnect with nature while still enjoying the luxuries of modern life. They worked late into the night, designing new branding, creating marketing strategies, and refining their approach. The excitement of building something new was infectious, and Emily felt her passion reignite in a way she hadn't felt in years. But even as they built this new vision, Emily knew that the path wasn't without its challenges. The dynamics within her family were still evolving. Though the business was moving forward, Emily could sense the underlying tension between her and Matthew. His role in the merger was still unclear. He had always been more of a figurehead than a hands-on leader. Emily had no interest in dragging him along or caving to his whims, but at the same time, she didn't want to shut him out entirely. The years of frustration, of being overlooked, had left their mark on her, and Matthew's seeming lack of accountability weighed heavily on her. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of negotiations, Emily sat down with Liam, their favorite way of unwinding being quiet conversation over a glass of wine. She found comfort in his presence, in the way he listened without judgment, always offering insight that seemed to cut straight to the heart of things. "What's bothering you?" Liam asked, sensing her unease. Emily took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "It's Matthew. I'm trying to move past the bitterness, but sometimes I just feel like he hasn't really learned anything. It's hard to be in this position with him, to work with him, knowing how much he's cost the family." Liam nodded thoughtfully, his eyes warm but understanding. "You've made great strides, Emily. You've built something that's yours. This new chapter with the company, it's your vision. But family dynamics, they're complicated. Sometimes the hardest part of leadership is letting go of past resentment and learning how to work together. You're doing that, and I think deep down so is Matthew. He might not show it the way you do, but he's still trying to find his place in all of this." Emily smiled faintly, feeling the weight of his words. Liam always knew how to ground her. She had spent so much of her life fighting against the expectations of her family, of Mountain Pine Lodge, that she had almost forgotten how to truly let go of the past. I know. I've been so focused on proving myself that I haven't really allowed myself to heal, Emily admitted. But I think I'm ready to try. Ready to make things right with him, and with everyone. The decision to try and reconcile with Matthew was not one Emily made lightly. It was the kind of thing that required vulnerability, something Emily had always kept at arm's length. She had spent too many years feeling rejected, too many years working to prove herself, but she realized that in order to move forward, she needed to let go of the weight that had been holding her back. A few weeks later, after several tense but necessary conversations with her parents and Liam, Emily arranged a meeting with Matthew. It wasn't a grand gesture. They met in the quiet of the Summit's lounge, a place that had seen both triumph and turmoil. Emily sat across from her brother, her hands folded in front of her, her posture steady but her heart racing. "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice calm but firm, "about how things have gone between us. And I want to be honest with you. I've held on to a lot of anger for a long time, but I don't want that to define our future. I want us to work together, really work together, and build something better for the company. For all of us." Matthew looked at her, his face unreadable. "You've done an incredible job, Em. I can't deny that. I wasn't ready to take on what you did. I know I've let you down, but I'm willing to try. I think we can build something great together. If you'll let me." For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Matthew she had known all these years. This was someone who had grown, someone who was willing to take responsibility for the past. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt the weight of their shared history begin to lift. "I'm willing to give you a chance," Emily said, her voice softening. "But it's going to take time and it's going to take trust. We have to be on the same page, Matthew. And we have to be ready to let go of the old patterns that have held us back." Matthew nodded, his expression softening. "I know. I'm ready." And just like that, something shifted between them. It wasn't an instant fix, it wasn't magic. But it was a start. Emily had made peace with the past, and in doing so, she had opened the door to a new chapter. A chapter where she and Matthew could, for the first time, truly work together. As the months went by, the business continued to thrive. The merger wasn't just about the companies, it was about the family, about healing old wounds and rebuilding what had been broken. And Emily, with Liam by her side, knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to push forward, not just for success, but for the future they had always dreamed of. In the end, Emily had found the balance she had been searching for her entire life. Success wasn't about doing it alone. It was about building a future with those who truly mattered. It was about the connections they made, the trust they built, and the legacy they would leave behind together. As Emily stood in the bustling lobby of the Summit, now a symbol of everything she had fought for, she realized that success was never just about the destination. It was about the journey, the growth, the setbacks, and the relationships she had built along the way. She had spent years proving her worth, not just to her family, but to herself. And in the process, she had discovered something more profound than professional achievements: the strength to forgive, to evolve, and to create something lasting. Her partnership with Liam, her reconciliation with her family, and the transformation of Mountain Pine Lodge were not just milestones in her career. They were reflections of the person she had become. Emily had learned that true success wasn't about validation or accolades. It was about the ability to build a future on your own terms, to lift others up, and to create something meaningful that could stand the test of time. As Ember Group and Mountain Pine Lodge continued to grow and thrive together, Emily understood that her journey wasn't defined by the past, but by the choices she made every day moving forward. She had built a legacy that was hers, one that wasn't just about business, but about family, love, and the impact they could make on the world. And as she looked toward the future, standing beside Liam and the team they had built, she knew that no challenge was too great. Together, they had created something extraordinary, something that would endure for generations to come. Emily had finally found peace, not because everything had gone perfectly, but because she had learned to trust herself, to let go of old hurts, and to embrace the endless possibilities ahead. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that the future was hers to shape, and that with the right people by her side, anything was possible.